welcome to the Ignorance Project. Today, I'm very excited about I always pause at this point because I knew you in college, but you were older. I don't know if you knew me. Someone I went to college with.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, Eric Adams. So, Eric, if you want to go ahead and just start by talking about what you do and your background.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Shireen. My name is Eric Adams. As Shireen introduced me, I am an attorney. I practice in the state of California. Um, I practice in the areas of criminal defense and estate planning.
Mhm.
So on the criminal defense side, I defend individuals charged with crimes from petty theft all the way to homicides.
Oh,
And
wow.
then from on estate planning, I help clients determine their life and legacy by carving out their transition of their wealth to their loved ones and other entities that they may desire their wealth to be transferred to. We do that through a variety of instruments. Most common is the revocable living trust. We also do it through wills, and then we plan for incapacity as well. So that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. I am a Los Angeles native, so I'm back home practicing. I opened my own firm a little less than 2 years ago.
Mhm.
So I've been practicing for 10 years as an attorney.
Oh,
And
wow. It's been that long? Wow.
it's been that
Okay.
long. March 2013 is when I got my
Mhm.
license. So
Wow.
March 2023, I hit 10 years.
That's awesome. So I have a few questions for you. One of the things that I like to ask people that graduated from HBCU specifically is a little bit about why you decided to choose an HBCU and also what was the journey that brought you towards deciding to be a lawyer.
So it's interesting. You know, growing up in LA, I can't say that I was like dead set on going to an HBCU,
Mhm.
but from my high school experience, I ended up going to a historically Black boarding school, Pine Forge Academy in Pennsylvania. And that school is essentially like a feeder school to Oakwood.
Yeah.
So, I looked at some other options for sure, got into some other schools, but ultimately I felt that I wanted to be in an environment that would support my spiritual growth as
Mhm.
well as my educational growth. And I felt like Oakwood was the best fit for that. In retrospect, I love the fact that I went to an HBCU. I'm extremely proud of my educational experience. And I think that HBCUs really gave me the ability to thrive as an adult
Right.
that I don't know that I would have had because I just feel like, at Oakwood, you're kind of like, it's kind of sink or swim a little bit. So, and if you got it in you, you start swimming. And
Right.
so, that's what I did. And that's what a lot of my friends did. And,
Mhm.
that's why I think the school produces a lot of successful professionals or, in multiple capacities.
Mhm. Thank you. So, criminal defense, because that is a very, I don't want to say unique, but when I think about criminal defense, I think about law and order, right? So, what made you decide to go into criminal defense?
Sure. So when I was in high school, my father used to. So I got in a really big, really big trouble at school,
Hmm.
and I was like grounded for an entire summer.
Oh,
And so one of
wow.
the
Okay.
books that, so all I had were like books, which
Right.
like kind of started my. I had already loved to read, but it kind
Yeah.
of like helped. So I read a book, the autobiography of Malcolm X. It
Excellent book.
really, yes,
Yeah.
it really just changed the way that I think,
Hmm.
in terms of, and it inspired me to want to help my people and be of service.
Hmm.
And so when I was in at Oakwood, I was studying finance. It was right around the time when the economy collapsed. So there was no job prospects. And so I started looking at opportunities and I decided I wanted to go to law school. And when I was in law school, I got an internship at the Georgia Innocence Project where we helped find evidence to reopen investigations to individuals who may have been unjustly convicted of a crime.
Mm-hmm.
Then I came across a book, The New Jim Crow by
Mm-hmm.
Michelle Alexander, and I read that book and I was like, oh, I know exactly what I
This
want
is
to
it.
do.
Wow.
So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, kudos to you. I think that's very rewarding work. And thank you for doing it.
For
Um,
sure.
but that's not what I wanted to talk to you about today. That was just me being kind of nosy and curious. I wanted to talk to you today about estate planning. And the reason that I wanted to talk to you about that is there was this little show, Insecure. I don't know if you've heard of it,
Of
but
course.
of course, right? One of the episodes of Insecure really tackles the lack of conversations that happen in the Black community, specifically around estate planning and what happens when your parents get sick and they pass, or even when you get sick, or, you know, when things are not in order. So I know for me, after I saw that episode, about a year later, I ended up purchasing a house. And I said, you know what? I need a will because I don't want something to happen to me and the government gets my money.
Sure.
So my first question for you around estate planning is, what made you pull that focus into your firm?
Yes, that's a great question. So um, we are right now in the greatest transfer of wealth this country has ever seen. CNBC produced an article last year that talked about baby boomers would be leaving some estimated $68 trillion or transferring $68 trillion to their loved ones or individuals, you know, coming behind them.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed as well that there was a lot of talk about creating generational wealth, but one of the critical components of creating generational wealth is learning how to transfer that wealth to your loved ones. And I noticed that there was a lack of knowledge there. So I just took it upon myself to say, hey, let me look into this and learn more about it.
Wow.
And so I started studying how to create great estate plans, the tools that are available.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, again, like similar to my inspiration in going into criminal law. This was also my inspiration in going into estate planning because I knew that it was something that my people could benefit from, and then all people could benefit from, because, you know, knowing what to do and how your wealth and how your legacy is going to transfer, I think is critically important, especially considering the time that we're in with the generational transfer of wealth.
Right. And when I look at, because you mentioned CNBC, it's really interesting to see how the pandemic positively impacted the Black community and that more of us were able to purchase houses because of the lower interest rates, right? So I'm one of the people that benefited from that. And with that, I know just personally, I've had conversations with my family, my parents, and I've always been kind of obsessed with like, what happens when you guys get older?
Mm-hmm.
There are two of us, you know, my parents both come from big families. My dad's one of 10, my mom's one of 6. So they have like a network of people to help take care of their parents once they get older. But for me, it's me and my brother. And I've always thought, how are we going to handle this? And they get really annoyed with me, like, oh my gosh, Shireen, like, you're really extra, calm down, right? But it's a big concern for me. So for me, trying to have that conversation with them, probably because I've been so obsessed about this for so long, like since I started working, I've been like, we need to figure out like what happens when you guys retire. And they're like, we've got it handled, but I want to understand. So for you, what would be a recommendation that you have to people like me trying to have those conversations with their parents?
I think what you're doing is definitely good. You know, it's tough because, you know, growing up, like my grandmother, for instance, like my dad learned from some coworkers and things like that, that all of them had insurance policies out on their parents, you know? And so my dad tried to initiate that conversation with his mom, and she was just like, are you trying to kill me off? Like, what's going on? You know, like, so I think that having those conversations and initiating them is the start to really getting our parents and just those around us to see that, you know, we know that it's inevitable that we are going to pass away. You know, it's an unfortunate fact of life. And so I think that characterizing it or shaping it in the sense of like, you know, them sort of extending their duty as parents or their desire as parents to ensure that their kids are taken care of or that their grandchildren are taken care of, I think is a good way to contextualize the conversation. You know, and everybody's different, you know, but the reality of the situation is everybody has an estate plan. And I say that, you know, and I mean that in all sincerity. It's either you define your estate plan or the government defines it for you, right? And so do you really want the government to determine who gets what, how it gets there? And do you want to pay the government to see that it gets there? Or do you want to go ahead, take the time, set aside your own plan, give it to who you want to give it to, whether you want to give it to a charitable entity or you want to give it to your kids, or maybe, you know, you have young kids. And so you want to make sure that the money is there for when your kids are older, that they can access it, you know, considering that they've reached a certain age or they've graduated from college or things like that, you know? And so I think that talking about those benefits of what estate planning can do are really critical to getting our parents to really have those conversations and at least put something in place, even if they don't want to talk to you about it at the outset.
Okay, thank you. That's a good point. And I know initially, a lot of times, unfortunately, I have this tunnel vision of like, okay, black and white, but there are other minority communities, of course, marginalized communities, of course. And when you look at the Americans that don't have a will, Hispanics actually top that list, following Blacks, English-speaking Asians, and then ending with whites. So it's just interesting to see how much marginalized communities just don't move forward with having these types of conversations. And I do think that it can kind of seem a little bit gruesome to our parents and grandparents to even bring these topics up.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it can, it's interesting too, because a lot of people think that maybe they don't have, you know, maybe the assets or the net worth to warrant creating an estate plan. But I can assure you they absolutely do most times. And if you have at least just a house, one thing, it can be beneficial to create a trust even as opposed to a will.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, because with the will, you still have to go through a court process called probate in order to enact the transfer, ensure the transfer of the assets to your loved ones, who the will leaves it for.
Right.
With a trust, you avoid probate. You can avoid the court process. And so you can set it up to where your assets are transferred outside of the court, which means that in a place like California, I'll give you an example. I handled a probate for a client, and his mother had a home that was about $750,000 in worth, and it cost about $20,000 to get that house to my client.
Wow.
Where with a trust, it would have been much cheaper and much less expensive. So, you know, it's something to consider as well. Sorry for the background noise.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. So at what point would you recommend that someone starts to move forward with reaching out to an estate planner?
I think that there are, you know, different areas of life or different stages of life that call for it. I think anytime that you have assets that that would need, like titled assets that would really need to be transferred, it's never a bad time to do so. So if you have a house, mainly for like your, you know, certain things like your bank accounts that have beneficiary designations, life insurance and things like that, you can typically avoid probate if you designate your beneficiaries. But I think something like a trust will give more meat or more context to how those assets are distributed. I definitely think, you know, a lot of people think that they have to be older or, you know, kind of facing, you know, towards the end of their life, but I don't think that that's necessarily true. One of the things that we do as an estate planner is determine how your kids are taken care of if you have young kids, you know? And so some people might think that, oh, I had a godparent ceremony, and so everyone knows that if something
That's
happens to
it.
me, well, that's not
Right.
God ceremonies are not legally binding.
Yeah.
You would have to get a guardianship plan together, naming who you would like to take over your minority kids, and
Hmm.
who you would like to not only take physical custody, but take custody of their estate, because most kids, and I know in
Hmm.
California, and I would imagine most states, they cannot just inherit money as a minor. It has to be set up in an estate so that they can draw from it at some point when they're older. And
Hmm.
so um, if you're a young family with kids, that's definitely, it's always a good time to plan for incapacity and plan for, a premature death, because you just never know what will happen.
Thanks for saying that. And how does it work if the parents are no longer together?
It's still, you can still carve out an estate plan.
Hmm.
You know, most estate plans, we do singles. So if it's not most, but we do have estate plans for single individuals, and
Hmm.
then you can do estate plans that encompass the marriage as well. With the marriages, sometimes things can be, a little tricky. Sometimes couples may not understand this, but when an estate planner is dealing with both people, they're both entitled to, attorney-client privilege and to full transparency. And
Right.
so if, one person has like a kid on the side or something that they want to provide for, it might get
Right.
disclosed in the estate planning process, so,
Hmm.
or it will get disclosed, in most contexts. But yeah, I mean, there's opportunities in planning for, all different walks of life, all different stages, and
Okay.
and relationship statuses.
Well, thank you. That's all very good to know. So, how can people reach you if they're interested in moving forward with estate planning,
Yes,
or
if
if they
you
need a criminal defense attorney?
or if they
Or,
or if
yeah.
they need a criminal defense attorney,
Yeah.
our website is ericadamslaw.com.
Mhm.
ericadamslaw.com. You can fill out a contact us form on the website that will come directly to me. You can also, and if you go to the website, you have my number, my email, all of those things. I am very accessible. So
Yeah.
feel free, if you're in California or if you just have general questions about estate planning, I'm happy to answer where I can.
Okay. Thank you so much for taking time to speak with me today. Really appreciate it. Thanks for listening. I hope you leave feeling enlightened.